Hey guys, today's video is going to cover organelles. So we're going to talk about organelles, structure and functions of organelles that are inside of our cells. Just kind of learn what they are and what they do. So the targets really are compare structures and functions of plants and animal cells and how cells, structures or organelles relate to their functions. So what is an organelle? Essentially an organelle means a tiny organ. These are really tiny because they're inside of one cell. They're membrane bound, so they have their own membrane in a eukaryotic cell. Remember in prokaryotes in the last video we said they did not have membrane bound organelles. They do have organelles, not as many, and not membrane bound. Membranes are made of lipids. It's an important concept that lipids help to form this membrane, so those molecules that we talked about in the first unit start to play a factor in the function of even on a cellular level. The membranes keep the inside of the organelle separate from the outside. So it's like a wall, but kind of flexible and allows regulation of things moving in and out of the cell, which is going to be really important when we talk about cell transport. So each organelle has a specific job or function to do. Here's a list of just some organelles down here, and we're going to go through all of these organelles right now. So the first thing is the cell membrane. You also hear it called or written as a plasma membrane. So use those interchangeably, that's fine. Just know that I may too, all right? It's referring to the exact same thing. The function is basically structure and security. It is semi-permeable, all right? So this is a new term for us. Essentially what we're saying is that some stuff is allowed to pass through the cell, all right? So some things can pass through. It surrounds the entire cell. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes, so it forms that outer edge, and it is made of phospholipids, so phosphate, we call it a phospholipid bilayer, and then proteins kind of wedged in there. So you can see this. Here's your bilayer. We have, it's red here, stick out. We have one layer here, and then we have another layer here, and they're kind of sandwiched together. So we have this hydrophobic head, which means it, or hydrophilic head, it means it is attracted to the water that's floating around here and here, and so it flips out that way, and it forms this phospholipid bilayer. The next organelle we'll talk about on the outside is really plants only. This is really important that we make this distinction, that plants are only ones that are having these cell walls. Some prokaryotes will have a cell wall as well, or can. The function is structure, helps plants stand up. They don't have all the complex systems that a lot of animals have, so plants have these kind of special structures. It helps them stand up, stay rigid, and provides a lot of structure and protection for them as a living thing. It's like a solid wall. It surrounds the entire cell, even the plasma membrane. So the membrane is kind of inside this wall structure. The next things that we have in the organelle list, not really organelles, but things that are inside the cell that are important. The cytoplasm is just really the fluid, the space. You may refer to it just as the water that's kind of floating around inside the cell. Basically, it allows for a place for the organelles and the proteins to work and move inside the space. The cytoplasm is in eukaryotes and prokaryotes, so it's worth mentioning. The next thing is the cytoskeleton. It's made of proteins. It's kind of like tracks that the organelles and other kind of proteins and things can move along the way. So kind of think of it as like a guiding system, like roads almost inside the cell. The next one, probably the one you hear most often used, is the nucleus. The nucleus, its function is really storage of DNA for the most part. That's what we'll talk about anyway, is that in a eukaryotic cell, the nucleus contains DNA. Remember, prokaryotes don't have a nucleus. Ribosomes are made in the nucleolus, which is inside the nucleus, so there's a tiny little organelle inside of the nucleus that kind of gets its own special function there. So ribosome construction kind of begins there too. Ribosomes, maybe one of the most important in terms of the function of our cells and allowing them to do what they do. They are created in the nucleus. We talked about that, the nucleolus constructing them. What's their function? They make proteins, right? So the biggest thing they do is they make those proteins. Again, the biomolecule that we need, but remember, we're made up of proteins. And those proteins are, the information is contained in the DNA, and then the proteins are created based off that genetic information. But the proteins are what we are. That's what we're made of. That's what gives us our three-dimensional shape and our structure and function. Ribosomes can be located, they can be free-floating in the cytoplasm, they can be attached to the ER, which we'll talk about, endoplasmic reticulum, and they can also be shipped, eventually will be shipped out of the cell. So anyway, so they can be located in a number of places, but attached to the endoplasmic reticulum and free-floating in the cytoplasm would be the two things. Prokaryotes and eukaryotes have them and need them to make those proteins. So here's the endoplasmic reticulum we were talking about. We had two types. The rough ER and the smooth ER. The rough ER looks rough because it has ribosomes stuck to it. Those tiny little dots, basically right down here. You can see the rough ER, all these little dots, right? Look like pimples. Those are little ribosomes attached. So again, they help create specialized proteins and really ship those proteins out to the Golgi and then out of the cell. It's located next to the nucleus for the most part because that's where the ribosomes are being made, and then they're being stuck right out there on the rough ER. The smooth ER has a little bit different function. It makes lipids and helps to process toxins a little bit. So there's a little bit different function there, but it's kind of the same organelle. So you just really have to know that there's endoplasmic reticulum's job, primary function would be this, to create those specialized proteins and then ship them to the Golgi. The next one, since we just talked about, is the Golgi. Its function is to modify, package, and ship proteins out of the cell, so it has a little bit of function in protein creation, but really what it's doing is it's packaging them in a membrane-bound vesicle, so it's sticking them inside these lipid packages, sending them to the cell membrane, and letting them fly out of the cell. So basically you can see this here, modifies, packages, and ships. This thing's a protein. It just got kicked out of that cell in one of these little blue vesicles. So this would be our vesicle right here. That was made from a portion of this Golgi. The Golgi just looks like a series of these flattened, kind of, I don't know, looks like a stack of pancakes almost when you see them under the microscope, something like this. You see these little layers, a bunch of skinny pancakes. Next one's a lysosome. This is an animal cell only. The function is recycling and waste removal. Can break up food particles into smaller parts in the cell, so it's really breaking stuff down, and old organelles can get digested and broken down too. So a place to kind of tear some things down apart and get rid of them. The chloroplast, again, here's another plant-only chloroplast. Really important, really important. Converts light into carbohydrates through the process of photosynthesis. The carbohydrate made is glucose. We'll see that in cell energy. It contains chlorophyll, which is green pigment. That's why they're green. And remember, carbohydrates are used by the cell for energy. So if it doesn't do this, energy is going to be in short supply for sure. The next one, talking about energy, is mitochondria. Provides the cell with energy. This is what's making the structure ATP, which is right there, which is really important. Keep in mind, plants and animals do have these, so they can both use them. However, an animal cell is only relying on mitochondria to create energy. So this is really important because without it, they don't have anything else. They don't have chloroplast to turn sunlight energy into carbohydrates. So the mitochondria will break down carbohydrates that an animal eats and create this ATP molecule. All right, so really important. The next thing that is also in plants and animals only, or plants and animals, it's both in plants and animals. However, we have a large central vacuole, so that's in plants only. So I'll just kind of make a note there, because that's what you're looking at. Right in here, we can see this this central vacuole that kind of presses up, not that, right there. There's your central vacuole. So you start looking at these vacuoles, they're going to fill with water and put pressure up against the outside of the cell to keep it rigid, to keep the plant rigid, and provides that structure. Other organelles that we can look at are not really organelles either. These Cilia Flagella, they're kind of things that are additions to a cell. So cilia are hair-like projections. So we can see cilia, hair-like projections right down here. Those things help catch particles, and cells can take them in. And then flagella are just kind of like these little whip-like things, like tails that used to swim and move. Comparison of plants and animal cells. A lot of similarities. I'll highlight the biggest ones here that are different in the plant cell. Remember, the cell wall is a really big one. The central vacuole is a big one. Because animal cells have those vacuoles just a little bit smaller in function. But those would be our biggest ones, and then obviously our chloroplast is the last one that we're looking at. So these big things make those plant cells different from animal cells in very significant ways.